One of Donald Trump's longtime confidants is expected to plead guilty to perjury. Allen Weisselberg arrived at the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse a little earlier on Monday, and a source tells CNN that the charges stem from testimony he gave during the civil investigation into the Trump Organization's finances. Weisselberg had been the company's chief financial officer. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to 15 counts of tax fraud and served about 100 days in jail. Let's bring in CNN's Kara Scannell, who joins us from New York. Kara, of course, this is a case you've been following very closely. Remind us just of who Allen Weisselberg is. He does have a long history with the Trump Organization.
Rahel, Allen Weisselberg has been with the Trump Organization for nearly 50 years. He even first started working with Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, a long time ago. And he had been a close confidant of the former president's until he left this organization after pleading guilty to those tax fraud charges. So today we are learning that Allen Weisselberg will be back in court. We see him there arriving at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and he's expected to plead guilty to perjury charges that relate to testimony he gave in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud investigation. He had testified during their investigation in 2020, and then he was also on the stand last year during that trial. Now, it's not clear exactly what he will be saying under oath that he lied about, but there have been questions raised about his testimony and the accuracy of it as it related to conversations he had with an insurance agent. That was one of these charges. And then also what he said about his knowledge of the size of the Donald Trump's triplex apartment at Trump Tower. That was a key part of the civil AG's case. So he is due in court this morning, where he will then enter these guilty pleas and say what he did. Now, this will be, what is important here is that although he is a longtime confidant of Trump's and he is pleading guilty for the second time, he is not going to be cooperating against Donald Trump. There had been pressure on him for years to, what they say, flip and testify against Trump, testify against him in that civil fraud trial and also with prosecutors, but he is not going to do that. He is just going to give a straight guilty plea, but he is not cooperating. Now, he is a central figure in the Manhattan DA's office criminal investigation of the former president involving the hush money payments and the reimbursements that were made to Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen. Weisselberg was at the center of these financial dealings, but, again, he is not expected to be called as a witness by either side. He will not be part of the trial, although he is at the center of it. So this is not necessarily negative for the former president, but another guilty plea by Weisselberg, certainly for perjury, would make him a tough witness if Trump's team did change their mind and want to call him. As we will learn more details about this, as you noted, Weisselberg had already served about 100 days in Rikers Island. That's this notorious jail in New York City. And, it is likely that as part of this guilty plea, he will have to serve additional time. So he could be heading back to Rikers. He is in his late 70s and has health issues. It's just another kind of fallout from this relationship with the former president that has lasted for decades, Rahel.
All right. Well, keep us posted how it all shakes out. Kara Scannell, live for us in New York. Kara, thank you. All right, a simple one-line note on the Supreme Court's website has ignited speculation this morning that we may get a ruling today on a major case involving Donald Trump. The court says that it has at least one decision to announce today, but there are no clues about what that ruling is actually about. But court watchers think that it could be the case involving the Colorado Supreme Court decision to ban Donald Trump from the ballot after finding that he engaged in an insurrection on January 6th. The Colorado Republican primary is tomorrow, and it is thought that the Supreme Court will want to issue a ruling before that vote happens. Let's bring in CNN's chief legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed. Paula, just sort of step back for us for a moment and remind us of the issues that the court is grappling with when it comes to this Trump Colorado ballot case.
Well, Rahel, it was about a month ago that oral arguments were conducted at the Supreme Court on this issue of whether former President Trump can be disqualified from the Colorado primary ballot because of the 14th Amendment's so-called insurrectionist bans. This was an effort to ban people from the ballot who had engaged in an insurrection. It was a post-Civil War provision that was mostly targeted at Confederates. So flash forward several hundred years, several states tried this novel approach. It was a long-shot approach to try to get Trump off of their ballots. 3 states actually have tried to remove Trump, and it's expected that whatever the Supreme Court decides here would apply across the country. But those oral arguments back a month ago went pretty well for Trump's lawyers. It was notable that the justices appeared skeptical of Colorado's argument that a state could remove someone from the ballot under the 14th Amendment, particularly when it came to Chief Justice John Roberts. He asked a lot of questions that I think gave us a preview of what we might see if this is the opinion that is issued today, which is that the 14th Amendment was not meant to give states the right to keep candidates off the ballot. So it is notable that it's taken quite some time. I mean, this case was expedited with the consideration that primaries were coming. So we'll be watching today to see if that indicates that they weren't able to come to a consensus or if some folks wanted to write a dissent. But again, it is expected that if this is the opinion that is issued today, Trump is expected to win. This is expected to be a successful case for him, and it would be quite surprising if it is not.
Yeah, it could be the beginning of what is expected to be a pretty successful week for him in general, at least politically. Paula, let me ask, is it unusual if in fact the court does issue this ruling on this case? Would it be unusual to issue that type of opinion ahead of a pretty big particular political event, in this case, Super Tuesday?
Well, that's what both sides were kind of pushing for, right? They wanted clarity on this issue. They didn't want people to go to the polls and not know if their vote was going to be counted. Of course, his name has been on the ballot. It will be on the ballot on Colorado no matter what. But Super Tuesday was the deadline. And talking to sources and publicly, both sides were like, hey, we really need some clarity, particularly ahead of Super Tuesday. Not only because Colorado participates in that, because that's really what kicks off the primary season. And people are going to want to know, hey, is the person that I'm voting for here going to end up on the general election ballot? So this is kind of a, look, the Supreme Court, they answer to no one. They do what they want when they want, Rahel. But this was a deadline that everyone was pushing for very logical reasons, which is why we expect this opinion to be issued today.
Yeah, well, we shall see. I mean, certainly legal observers have been looking for some clarity, just some contours of this amendment and sort of what the limits are. So we'll see. A lot to watch. Paula Reed, live for us in Washington. Paula, thank you.